Seraphine Voss arrived at Draveth Keep in a dress that did not belong to her. It was too long at the hem, too wide at the shoulders, and the pale gray color had been washed so many times it had forgotten what shade it started as. She had tied a cord around the waist to keep the fabric from swallowing her whole. No jewelry, no housepin, no escort waiting at the gate with a torch and a name card the way every other pack representative had. Just her, a small leather notebook tucked under her arm, and a name that nobody in that keep knew mattered yet. The hall steward checked his scroll 3 times when she gave him her name. Seraphine Voss, he repeated, the way people repeat things when they are hoping the repetition will make the thing make more sense. Yes, she said. Classification Omega. Guardian Pack Ashcroft. He looked up. You have no house sigil listed. No. He looked back at his scroll, then at her, then at the long line of representatives behind her, all of them pressed and polished and carrying the weight of their pack names like something they had been fitted for at birth. He announced her name into the hall as if reading from a grocery list. She walked the presentation aisle alone. 300 wolves filled the great hall that night. Candles the length of a man's forearm burned in iron holders along the walls. The stone floor had been polished until it reflected the flames back upward, so the whole room seemed to float between 2 fires. Every pack in the 5 territories had sent someone. Ranked warriors with jawlines like architecture, high-born daughters in dresses that cost more than some people's houses, proven betas with scars they wore as credentials. Ashcroft had sent Seraphine, not as a statement, not as strategy. The Alpha of Ashcroft had signed the attendance scroll without lifting his eyes from his wineglass, remembered at the last possible moment that he needed a representative of eligible age, and written down the only unmated name he could find. He had not thought about it after that. He had poured himself another glass. She had known, of course. She always knew. She had watched the scroll arrive, watched it get handed to his assistant, watched the assistant's face when he read the name and understood what had happened. She had said nothing. She had packed her notebook and borrowed the dress from a kitchen girl who was 2 sizes larger and had been kind enough not to make it strange. She walked the aisle the same way she did everything, quietly, without asking the room's permission. Alpha King Kalen Draveth watched the presentations from his throne at the end of the hall, with the expression of a man counting down the minutes until a formal dinner ends. He was tall in the way mountains are tall, the kind of size that rearranges the space around it. His dark hair was pulled back. His eyes were the gray of river water in winter. He had the face of someone who had been told he was exceptional so many times, and from such an early age, that the information no longer reached him. He had watched 47 presentations before Seraphine reached the foot of his dais. Something happened that he did not plan for. The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of ceremony. Something different. The particular silence that falls when a room registers, without fully understanding why, that it is in the presence of something it does not have a category for. She stood at the foot of the dais in her borrowed dress with her cord-knotted waist and her notebook under her arm, and she did not perform. She did not smile with the careful brightness of someone trying to be memorable. She did not angle her shoulders, or lower her lashes, or project the hopeful softness that the room had been rewarding all evening. She simply stood there, still, present, looking at him the way you look at a fire, acknowledging its heat without being afraid of it. Kalen stared at her for 3 full seconds. That was unusual. Most presentations held his attention for 1. Then he laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, precisely. It was the laugh of a man who has found an error in a formal document and is amused by the carelessness of whoever filed it. He turned to his second and said, loud enough for the nearest rows to hear, "An Omega. Ashcroft sent an Omega. Did they lose a bet?" The hall did what halls do when a king finds something funny. It laughed with him. Seraphine stood at the foot of the dais. She did not look at her shoes. She did not flush. She did not let her posture collapse into an apology, which was what the room was waiting for, which was the only response it had prepared space for. She looked at him, directly, without anger and without hurt, and without the particular blankness that people perform when they are pretending not to feel something they are clearly feeling. She looked at him, the way you look at weather, acknowledging it, not taking it personally. It was raining. That was simply what the sky was doing. She inclined her head the exact required degree of formal submission, not a single degree more. Then she walked back down the aisle. The keep assigned her to the servant wing, 3rd floor, a room with a door that did not latch properly, and a mattress that smelled like someone else's years. She did not sleep on the mattress. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall, her legs stretched in front of her, and she wrote in her notebook for an hour. Not feelings. She had stopped writing feelings around age 11, when she understood that writing them down only made them louder. She wrote observations instead. She had been writing observations since she was 7 years old, and noticed that the strongest person in any room is rarely the loudest one. She wrote about the hall tonight, about which betas had deferred to which alphas, before their own alpha had spoken. A small thing, invisible to most. But it told you who actually made the decisions. She wrote about the way the elder council members had positioned themselves around Kalen's throne, slightly behind and slightly to the left, which in old pack language meant they served but did not follow blindly. She wrote about exits, hierarchies, the geography of power in a room. She wrote for an hour. Then she slept, sitting up, with her back against the wall and her notebook closed against her chest. She woke before the sun arrived and found the archive before breakfast. The archivist was a small elderly beta named Wren, who had worked in the Draveth Keep records room for 32 years, and had not seen a visitor before the morning bell in all of them. He looked up from his desk when the door opened, and regarded her with the careful attention of someone who had spent a lifetime around old things, and had learned that the interesting ones do not announce themselves. Seraphine moved through the stacks the way she moved through everything. Without wasted motion, she read the spines as she walked, her fingers trailing the shelves but not touching, until she reached a sealed section near the back with a small brass marker that said Founder Records, Pre-Compact Era. "You read Old Tongue?" Wren asked. "Some," she said. "Those are the Founder Compacts, before the 5-packs existed as they do now." He paused. "Most alphas have never opened them." "I know." She found the volume she was looking for on the 3rd shelf. The binding was the color of very old wood, nearly black at the edges. She did not open it. She ran her thumb along the spine and read the small mark pressed into the lower corner by the maker's hand. She put it back. "The Voss Compact," Wren said. His voice had changed slightly, the change that happens when someone careful suddenly becomes more careful. "You recognize the maker's mark?" "Yes." "That's your name?" "Yes," she said. "It is." She thanked him and walked out of the archive into the gray pre-dawn light of the courtyard. The Elder Council convened at the 2nd bell. 5 elders in formal robes took their seats around the long stone table in the chamber above the great hall. They were the oldest wolves in the 5 territories. They held no pack allegiance. In theory, they held the law. Seraphine walked into the visitors' gallery, sat down, and waited. When the session opened, and the head elder, a wolf named Aldrich, whose white hair suggested decades of patience, asked if there were any matters before the council, she stood. "I am invoking Founder's right of recognition," she said, "under the 3rd Compact, Article 9, the right of a bloodline heir to present material evidence before the council, and before the reigning alpha, and to require formal acknowledgement under pack law." The chamber did the thing chambers do when something unexpected enters them. It went completely still. Aldrich looked at her for a long moment. "You'll need to state your bloodline claim," he said, because the law required him to respond. "Voss," she said. She opened her notebook. "They sent for Kalen Draveth. Not asked, sent for," which was a legal distinction and a significant one. Under the compacts, a founder's claim required the presence of the reigning alpha. It was not a request he could decline. The messenger had to tell him 3 times what was happening before he believed it. And when he walked into the elder chamber and saw Seraphine standing at the presentation table with her notebook open and 6 years of documented research laid out in careful order, he stopped walking for a moment. She did not look at him when he entered. She was explaining the first document to Elder Aldrich. She continued explaining it. He sat down. The documentation took 4 hours to present. She had records from 7 different archives across 4 packs. She had the original Voss Compact, photographed page by page from the bound copy in the Draveth archive, and cross-referenced against the fragment she had found in the Ashcroft cellar, at age 13, the burned edge of a document that someone had tried to destroy, but had only half succeeded, leaving enough to read, enough to follow, enough to spend 6 years quietly chasing. She had the original registry from the year she was brought to Ashcroft at age 6, and beside it, the amended registry filed 8 days later that reclassified her designation from the founding era category that no living wolf had used in 60 years to the simplest, smallest, most dismissible classification available. Omega, stamped over the truth. She had the letter between 2 council members, now dead, and the Alpha King's grandfather that discussed the reclassification. She had it photographed, and she had the original, sealed in a folder, and she placed it on the table in front of Elder Aldrich and stepped back. What the document said, in total, was this. The Voss bloodline could not produce an Omega, not by nature, not by genetics, not by the laws of the pack structure as it existed before the current system was built. The Voss line was the oldest in the 5 territories. Not Alpha. The designation was different, older, written into the compacts before the word Alpha had its current meaning. Sovereign. The bloodline that had established the terms under which all 5 packs agreed to coexist. The bloodline whose living heir, under Article 9, had the right to stand before the council and claim formal recognition. The bloodline that Kaelin Draveth's grandfather had conspired with 3 pack elders to erase when the last known Voss matriarch died and left behind a 6-year-old girl that nobody had thought to look for. They had looked for her eventually, when someone in Ashcroft mentioned the child's name to the wrong person. By then, the reclassification was already done. Seraphine had been 8. She had not known, then, what any of it meant. By 13, she had found the burned document. By 19, she had everything. The elders conferred for 11 minutes. Kaelin Draveth sat very still in his chair during all of it. He had the look of a man doing difficult arithmetic. He was understanding something in layers, the way ice melts, one layer at a time going soft before the next one starts. She had known last night. She had known when she arrived. She had known when she walked the aisle alone in the borrowed dress. She had known when he laughed. She had needed him to laugh. She had needed it witnessed, needed it in the room, because the 3rd compact specified that a bloodline claim could be elevated to sovereign recognition if the heir had been publicly diminished by the reigning authority within the cycle of presentation. The ceremony was the cycle. The laugh was the public diminishment. The witnesses had been 300 wolves and 5 pack representatives, and the elders of the 5 territories who were present for every presentation ceremony, and whose attendance was recorded in the official record. He had handed her exactly what she needed. He had done it himself. She had let him. Sunrise, at the exact moment specified in the compacts, when the early light came through the eastern window of the keep and crossed the courtyard stone, the 5 elders walked down from the chamber into the open air. The morning was cold. The sky was the pale silver that comes just before the world decides what color it wants to be. A few wolves from the overnight guard were in the courtyard. A kitchen worker, crossing with a tray, stopped walking and stood very still. The elders lined up facing the courtyard. Seraphine walked out of the keep door and stood in the light. She was still wearing the borrowed dress. She had not changed. There had been no time, and she had not thought it mattered. And it did not matter. The cord was still knotted at her waist. Her notebook was under her arm. The head elder, Aldrich, looked at her for a moment. He was a very old wolf, and he had seen many things in his decades of service. His expression was not readable in the way the expressions of the very old often are not readable. Too many years of careful watching. Then he bowed. All 5 of them bowed. Not to the Alpha King, who was standing in the doorway of the keep and had not moved. To her. Seraphine received it the way she had received the laugh, without performance, without tears, without the particular triumphant brightness that the moment was perhaps calling for, and that she simply did not have in her, had never had in her, because she had never been doing this for the feeling of it. She had been doing it to correct a record. The record was now corrected. She stood in the early light with her notebook under her arm, and she looked at the sky the way she looked at everything, simply, steadily. like someone who had been waiting a very long time for the weather to change, and now it had, and she was ready to find out what came next.